Thank you for joining me again here at St. Swithin's for a few more quotes from the little book that was written for the Queen's 90th birthday. She wrote the foreword herself, and it speaks of her faith and her trust in Jesus Christ, whom she loved and sought to follow. A small insight into the words of St. John in his Gospel as he speaks about Jesus Christ being the source of all grace. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made, says St. John. The Word of God, the Logos of God, the whole idea, the concept, everything that is encompassed in God is there. When we speak of an apple, that's the word apple, but you know what it is. It's red and green and tastes a certain taste, and it's very different if I say the word orange, which gives you an entirely different picture in your mind. Well, this word was with God and was God, and it's through him that we know God. Everything that was made through him, says St. John, and in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. It shows us how to live. That light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has never extinguished it or been able to overcome it. The Word became flesh, made his dwelling amongst us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. From him we have all received grace upon grace, for the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and the only Son, who is himself God, has made him known. That's what St. John wrote at the beginning of his Gospel, and he is at pains to tell us that he knew exactly what he was talking about in his first letter, chapter 1. He writes that again and again. This is what we touched, this is what we knew, this is what we held and heard and shared time with. This Jesus was extraordinary. Now, over the last few weeks, we've been thinking very much in this nation of ours of how extraordinary the Queen was, and she was a most extraordinary woman. By any measure, she was a remarkable woman. Most famous woman in the world, you might say. Just as relaxed in a school as a residential care home, and to everyone she was simply the Queen. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history. She had been advisor and confidant to 15 British prime ministers. At 90 years old, she still worked more than 40 hours a week. She employed 1,200 people, but fed her own dogs and drove her own Land Rover. She could rebuild the 6-cylinder 3-litre engine of an Austin K2 ambulance and would trek for hours across the moors of the Highlands of Scotland on her fell pony, but was just as comfortable and elegant amongst the statesmen and women of the world. The Queen attended church every week and even on holidays and prayed daily, but she never told anyone that they had to go to church. She set an example, and it's an example that we would do well to recognize. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ, and she, as a follower of Jesus Christ, embodied that grace and truth, and that's what has caused such an outpouring of grief at her passing, because our world is a place that needs grace and grace carriers, and Jesus calls us to be the grace carriers to the world. A few more quotes from her Christmas broadcasts, this one from 2012. Queen Elizabeth said, "This is the time of year when we remember that God sent his only Son to serve and not to be served. He restored love and service to the center of our lives in the person of Jesus Christ. It's my prayer this Christmas Day that his example and teaching will continue to bring people together to give the best of themselves in the service of others." The carol In the Bleak Midwinter ends by asking a question of all of us who know the Christmas story of how God gave himself in humble service. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what I can, I give him. I give him my heart. Extraordinary words to come from the mouth and the heart of a world leader. In her Christmas broadcast of 1980, the Queen said, As I go about the country and abroad, I meet many people who, all in their own unique ways, are making a real contribution to their community. I come across examples of unselfish service in all walks of life and in many unexpected places. Some people choose their occupation so that they can spend their lives in the service of their fellow citizens. We see doctors, nurses, hospital staff caring for the sick, those in churches, religious communities, in central and local government, in the armed services, in the police, in the courts and in prisons, in industry and commerce and science. It's the same urge to make a contribution which drives those seeking the highest standards in education of art, in music or architecture. Others find ways to give their service in their spare time through voluntary organizations or simply on their own individual initiative, contributing in 1,000 ways to all that is best in society, in providing company for the old and the housebound, help for the disabled, care for the deprived and those in trouble, concern for neighbours, encouragement for the young. To all of you on this Christmas Day, whatever your conditions of work and life, easy or difficult, whether you feel that you are achieving something or whether you feel frustrated, I want to say a word of thanks. And I include all of those who don't realize that they deserve thanks, that what they do is unseen and unrewarded, but is so important. The very fact of living a decent and upright life is in itself a positive factor in maintaining civilized standards. In 1986, she was to go on to say, Jesus' life began in humble surroundings, in fact, in a stable, but he was to have a profound influence on the course of history and on the lives of generations of his followers. You don't have to be rich or powerful in order to change things for the better, and each of us, in our own way, make a contribution. This was the theme of Queen Elizabeth's Christmas broadcast of 1975. Jesus' simple message of love has been turning the world upside down ever since he came. He shows that what people are and what they do does matter and makes all the difference. He commanded us to love our neighbours as we love ourselves. But what exactly is meant by loving ourselves? I believe it means trying to make the most of the abilities that we have been given. It's a matter of making the best of ourselves, not just doing the best for ourselves. We're all different, but each of us has his own best to offer. The responsibility for the way of life that we live, with all its challenges, sadness and joys, is ours alone. If we do this well, it will also be good for our neighbours. If you throw a stone into a pool, the ripples go spreading outwards. Our daily actions are like those ripples. Each one makes a difference. It does matter, therefore, what each individual does each day. Kindness, sympathy, resolution, courteous behaviour are infectious. Acts of courage and self-sacrifice, like those people who refused to be terrorized by kidnappers or hijackers, or who defuse bombs. They are an inspiration to others. If enough grains of sand are dropped into one side of a pair of scales, they will in the end tip it, even against a lump of lead. We may feel powerless and alone, but the joint efforts of individuals can defeat the evils of our time. Together they can create a stable, free and considerate society. Perhaps it was because of his early experiences of poverty and a refugee as a child, that throughout his ministry, Jesus of Nazareth reached out and made friends with people whom others ignored or despised. It was in this way that he proclaimed his belief that in the end we are all brothers and sisters in one human family. The Christmas message shows us that this love is for everyone. There is no one beyond its reach. Every year of Queen Elizabeth's reign, she has given a Christmas broadcast, and in it she has spoken of Jesus Christ and the example that he is to us, and his call to us to live well amongst one another in society. She sought to do that in her life as well as in her words, and she has brought nations together, people to forgive, and spoken equally kindly to the highest and the lowest in the land. In every year of Queen Elizabeth's reign, at Christmas, she addressed the nation in her Christmas broadcast. In it, she told of Jesus Christ, her faith and trust in him, that his example to us was to be followed, and it would improve our society. Indeed, it would improve our individual lives. And she brought nations together. We owe her a debt of gratitude, not only for her kind words, not only for when she stopped and spoke to individuals, but also because she lived out, as best she could, the truth that Jesus Christ came to give us grace, and in her own way, she was a grace giver and calls us to be the same. We will miss Queen Elizabeth from our nation and from our communities. We will miss her from our world. And the Christmas broadcast has been an extraordinary thing. Indeed, some households refuse to open their Christmas presents until after the Queen's speech. Others, well, we've ignored it and we've not counted it as a very special thing. But sometimes, to our own cost, we don't know the value of something until it's gone. May God rest her soul and ours when our time comes.